Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avignoni.
bringing you this week's Ascenda World. Hey, I see Michael Packer. Good morning. So there's a lot of stuff that's been swirling around this past week. Well, what else is new, right?
I don't know. This the weekend at least seemed really intense. Really intense.
Well, some interesting things came up, right? So we started talking last week about how did we even get into the destructive energy thing? Oh, because I was getting stuff about having details that were uncompleted, and I was getting frustrated
Right.
with stuff like that because it was stuff that I felt like was out of my control, but I felt like there's something hanging out there. And then you had something that complemented that. What was that?
We're talking Friday, right?
Yes, destruction
Um,
energies. We came into the destruction energies through you.
gosh, I can't even remember. I remember it was I guess shadow work more.
Oh, that's right, because you said you've been doing a lot of shadow work, right?
Right, right. Looking at that, on the microscopic level. Um, and so I felt that whatever I was running into fed right into what you were talking about with the details, and I felt that because a long time ago you and I talked about how, if you deny that darkness within yourself, it's denying a portion of yourself.
Right.
Even if it's that, 1/10 of 1%, it still keeps you from the wholeness. But in case of light and dark, it's more like 50%.
Yeah.
And that's denying a huge portion of yourself. So we've talked about that before. So and as you turn up the light, the shadows get more and more intense.
Right. Instead of allowing the wholeness, right?
Right.
The encompassing wholeness, right? Yeah.
Right.
And I was talking about, so what's the detail? Because it was like, there was the one thing that I was like really irritated was like everything I have to check up on and follow up on right now. It seems like 50 times more than usual with anybody else that's involved with stuff that I'm working on. And it's like, there's always like a little detail that I have to like, sort of like drill in to make sure it gets
Or tend to.
right.
Right.
So that's when I said, well, what's the detail, right? What's the undone? And it's like, well, because what we talked a couple of weeks about being stuck in the not being ready, not coming out of the cocoon too early, right?
Right. Right.
And I think that's where the other details, like, well, wait, there's a detail that's not done, right? There's a detail
Right.
that's not done.
Right.
And so it's that piece of shadow work that we agreed to look at in doing this way, right?
Right. Right.
And what's interesting, I guess you can look at how everybody, there's not everybody, how so much of the population is now getting irritated. So remember we had the week of fear, we had the couple of weeks of fear, then we had the weeks of anger. We have these things like built up on top of each other. And the next thing for us to do is resolution. And the only detail for that is to look in the mirror and say, well, where is it coming from within me?
Right. Well, it was right before we got on the call. I was writing down a dream that I had early this morning, and it's so perfectly depicts this whole thing. It's like I'm driving somewhere and I know exactly where I was. I was leaving a post office, and it's a really hard turn into traffic because it's like 8 lanes, 4 in each direction, and it's a rise to a railroad track, and then right there's where I was trying to pull out into traffic. So I'm making a right turn, which is not a big deal, but there's this big black vehicle, and it looks like one of the Road Warrior Mad Max kind of thing. It's like Star Trek added in with the bodies of dead people on the outside, and knives and barbs,
Oh, wow.
and it's just sitting there. It's not moving. It's just sitting there. And it's like, so I can't see what's coming beyond it because it's blocking the oncoming traffic. And it's like, so how can I pull out? Because it's right there. And there could be something behind it or in one of the other lanes. And it's like, so I pull out. So then it's right behind me. So it's always behind me. So I speed up and it's right there. I slow down and it's even closer, you know, and I'm like, okay, so it's my rate limiting step. It controls everything. It controls how fast I go, how slow I go, where I go. And I was like, that's it. That's that darkness sitting there, always right there. You know, it's like, I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you.
Right, right.
But
Yes.
it's always right there. And it's like, until I turn around, face it, embrace it, welcome it back home, can I ever have access to all of me? And I was like, wow, you know, leave it to Dallas to put it in a traffic analogy.
Right. Well, it's not just Dallas, but yeah, yeah.
Right, right.
It's funny though that you say that, because I too was looking at dreams, a series of dreams that I've been having, and saw it sort of similarly, different but similar, right? So it had to do
Right,
with moving and going places, right?
right,
And for me, the recurrence is I'm in an airport and I'm constantly on the verge of missing my flight.
right.
I'm on the verge of like being late, having to change flights, flight gets canceled. And it's all stuff that, and then I have to just cope. I have to deal with what's given to me. Right.
Right, right. You're at its mercy.
And even when it works out, because it always does ultimately.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Like I was allowed to go forward. I was
Right.
allowed to drive around.
Right.
But
Right.
within this.
Right. And so I've been looking at that like for a week now, because I'm like, why am I having constant, at least 3 or 4 times a week, I'm having a dream that I'm in an airport or a train station. That's the other one. It's a train station or an airport.
Right.
And so I finally got to looking at, okay, so I'm thinking I'm just going to go with the flow, right? In these dreams. I'm just going to go with the flow. And then I was like, wait a second though, because I also had these perceptions. Well, what are these transport stations? Are they in between lifetimes, in between dimensions, in between, it could be in between anything, right? How we see it.
Right.
And then I was like, well, if that's the case, then it's my creation, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so then I was like, so it was very subtle, but very much the same thing that you're talking about.
Yeah. Michael
right?
said transition dreams.
Yeah, totally. And I was like, okay, but it wasn't just the transition thing. It was that I was always at the, like I always felt like I had to follow the rules of whatever. Right.
Oh, exactly.
And so I finally,
I had to live within those limits.
yes, right. And so I finally came to the place of saying, wait a second, I created that transport station, whatever, or transport station. However it is envisioned by me, it doesn't matter. What am I accepting? Because I don't want to look at what's behind the curtain. Like, what's causing the creation or causing the limit me to accept the limit.
And what limitations am I just accepting?
Yes.
Right. Which, okay, so bring that all the way back to this COVID-19. It's like, okay, look at the limitations we've been accepting.
Yes. Right. And what a fabulous experience for us to stand into to turn and look in the mirror and say, wait a second. And, in the beginning, you and I had talked about this, neither you nor I have been afraid of this from the beginning. Right. There's nothing to be afraid of, right? Not even in our vibration, just doesn't even exist. It's just fine. It's just part of the bigger picture. And yet, so this does tie around in the way of, we are in such a habit of fighting or accepting. It's the fight or flight, or accepting, or I'm accepting what I'm handed, what's handed to me as a limitation, because I'm not willing to look at what's beyond why that limitation is being imposed on me, why I'm allowing that to be created, because that's me too.
Right. And I think that's, it's a whole new me too.
Yeah.
It's not me too from the abuse. It's me too. This is me too.
Right.
Wow.
So and it's funny because it's so easy to fool ourselves into saying, I can't do anything about this because look
Yeah,
at,
and that's not me. That yeah.
right. That's the victimhood thing, right? That's the, oh, that was, oh, I can't do anything about it. And, da, da, da. And yet the thing is, what I was guided to do, and you and I've talked about this, I don't know if we talked about it on the air though. What I was guided to do at the very beginning of all of this was to actually go and embrace the virus as
Right.
part of me with love, with gratitude for what it was there to show me, and to allow it to be a part of who I am seamlessly, right? So
Right.
then in doing so, there's actually no fear or no possibility of me getting it because my body won't fight. It would just pass through unannounced.
Yeah, it's almost like the energetic form of immunity.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, but that was the thing to look at. And it's like, okay, so we've committed to doing this collectively, right? Which is what we
Right.
get to here on this
Right.
discussion. And so now look at what's there for us. Ooh, this is so big. It's only like hard to even put in my
Right.
I
Right.
can only, I'm getting the outskirts of it. It's like, okay, so first we're made to, we decide to fear it, right? Collectively,
Right.
many fear it. Um, and then that causes us to allow limitations without looking beyond it. Like, why did I create this in my reality? Possibility. How is this not like, how am I allowing victimhood when it's really my opportunity for empowerment?
Right. Right. That opportunity word. Right.
you know and so, but that's the habit we get into, right? Is that I'm going to shut down because I'm afraid, right? That's
Right.
ego.
Right.
And so I'm going to accept what's being handed to me. And then it's like, but if we're looking at, wow, you and I did the whole series of getting beyond, what was it? Beyond victimhood, right? Getting beyond
Yeah.
victimhood and all
Right.
kinds of things. We did that whole series back in December, January, right? And
Right.
so this is what we were leading up to. This is the big thing.
Right. Right.
And so, people will go, oh, that's woo woo, that's fairy dust or whatever, and da, da, da. Like, people can say what they want. Look at quantum physics. I mean, honestly, that
I
now I
know.
understand why I was guided to look more, because I knew about quantum physics. I didn't know a lot of detail, and then I took a little thing about it, and I'm like, oh, well, I see how it all connects energetically with what we already knew. But it also, because everybody wants to see concrete evidence, like, well, then go look at quantum physics. That's what I just
Right.
tell them now, is like, then go and learn about quantum physics, because that actually explains this energetically, why our resistance creates something that's meant to be, our resistance is some causes more darkness and fear, right?
Right.
Like you're saying,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's like the more we turn on the light, the more the shadow there is,
Right.
because we forget that the light is not all encompassing. The light is an opposite of the dark, which was created in duality. And
Well, and they're each of them are defined as the other, lack of
yes,
the other.
yes, based on the other, exactly.
Right.
And so when we accept the wholeness,
That that's the power right there.
right?
That is, and that is, a lot of people are like, I can't see myself as that. Like last year, I remember when I was mowing the lawn and I accidentally ran over that bunny, and I mean, it wrecked my world for a long time because I couldn't see myself as that murderer.
What you judged, right?
Right. And it's that whole, and this is something else that came back to me this early this morning. Part of the end of that dream and everything is, you know, um, you bring it back to the Bible and the Garden of Eden and the knowledge of good and evil. What if you change that to the knowledge of judgment? Because
Right.
that's really all it is.
Well, or just the creation of
Of judgment.
duality.
Right. Which is duality.
Right.
Judgment duality. And
Right.
it's that whole, it's that entire, I hate to use the word whole. it's the it's the entire split that is just wreaking havoc on us.
Yes. Yes. And so we're getting into this place. And so, good morning, Gloria. We've gotten to this place of all these layers. And so the lesson just keeps on posing itself for us to look at, right?
Right.
Okay, well, fear of the virus thing, right? Fear of what? Death. We talked about that. Or I talked about that last week.
Right.
I don't
Well,
know.
it's funny because, I read something where somebody says, nobody gets out alive.
Right.
It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And it's time
The
for me.
way we define this, nobody gets out alive.
Yeah. And it's like, and I feel like it's like, oh, well, is it time for me? If it's time for me to put my toys down and leave the playground, then it's time for me to do that. Right.
And it's going to happen whether I'm afraid of it or not.
Exactly. So why put any energy to that fear? Right.
Right.
And by the way, because I don't judge death, that, like I did my whole thing on Thursday on living the shift on that is, we're so motivated and in duality of against avoiding death in general.
Right. Right.
Right.
We almost stop living in
Right.
order to avoid death.
Yeah. Yeah. Becoming germophobic, and I mean, masks and gloves, which by the way, do very little, if anything, right?
Well, but it just delays the inevitable in my mind.
And
It's here.
well, and I know, and then it's funny of people going, oh, well, what's interesting is you have a growing population that's like, well, if we need to get to herd immunity, then we actually are going to have to get out there and
Right.
get exposed to it, which is
Right.
losing your fear of it, which is great because it's actually a point of shifting energetically of saying, all right, bring it on,
Right.
I always say bring it on with ease and grace and
So
flow.
then that's judging it. It's welcoming it back home.
Yeah. Yes.
Embracing all of who you are.
Yes, and looking at every limitation and being willing to look at the shadow behind what was imposed, what we believe was imposed on us as victimhood, right? So
Right.
then you have the anger about feeling like there's a whole bunch of population control going on, which there is,
And always has been.
and always has been, not anything new.
Right. Right.
And by the way, that's us too, right?
Right.
When we start looking at the wholeness. So it's for us to be able to, well, and it's funny too, because the thing about you is that whole, like, yeah, I'm, like that, and you've talked about this, how I'm such a good person, like about, that judgment, right?
Right.
And yet you love those, gritty TV shows we were talking about, right?
Yeah. Right.
What we call like the dirty little secret part of us, right?
Right.
And that's the part for us to bring out, to expand on, to embrace, and to say, welcome home, right? And not hide it and say it's not good, it's bad, right?
Right.
What if you said, I am, like, and that's what I did in meditation in the very beginning of this was, I am that virus.
Right.
That virus is me. I am that virus.
Hey, Nikki.
Good morning, Nikki. Good morning, Anne.
Oh yeah. Hi, Anne. Right. I mean, I read someone said that, we're the light bulb, and, without the darkness, which is the electricity, we're kind of powerless. And I liked that image that it created, is that by embracing that, that's when we come into our power.
Well, and coming into our power is that, and I believe that a couple of weeks ago, I think my voice still sounds normal, right? You said
It does. It does.
that whole weird, well, no, it was just last week, right? So that happened like last weekend. I had that whole meditation where it was like, I had Callie and Pele and what was the other one? Pachamama, like all like flowed back into me, the energy of that. And those energies like Callie and Pele, especially, people look at with fear because it's a very destructive but rebirthing kind of energy. And it was all me, right? And it all came back into me. And of course, at the same time, so is Mother Mary, so is like Mother Mary, and so is like all these other things. Michael's like, whatever. So I go, it was disconcerting to me. Anyway, the funny thing was how that happened after I had that experience, right? And it was like I had this collective that joined into me that I allowed to come back home, the energies of that to come back home, right? And I didn't feel any resistance to it, but like consciously within that voice thing was so weird.
Well, and I thought it was just my connection at the time, but it was on the recording. And then it happened to you again.
And then, no, that's profound. Yeah. Nikki says, no, that
I
is
am the virus.
the virus. Yeah. Yeah. And then Thursday. And when I did my podcast, it's still, the whole thing was like that. So, yeah. And so it's funny that it was, and I never felt resistance to it. In fact, I loved it, saying, oh, I remember this part of me. And oh, it's wicked cool. Right. Because we love that just as much as the other stuff. Right.
Right.
And that's what we've created, and that duality. So when we accept that, right? So it's like, okay, I am destruction and I'm birth, right? I am all of that.
Because you can't have one without the other.
Not in duality, no. And because you define one from the other, like you're saying, like light and dark, right?
Right, exactly.
So if we are, viruses and sickness and disease and everything else, it's in energy work. We talk about, and in quantum physics, so if you want to get into quantum physics, go look at that too. In energy work, we talk about disease being dis-ease, right? Which means that I am holding some resistant energy within me that's causing non-flow in my body because I'm pushing it away, because I'm putting it in the closet, because I'm judging it. And therefore, I'm creating toxicity within my body, which then creates disease.
Right.
So yes, the virus is us.
Right. And every virus is.
Yes, every virus, every sickness, every disease is us. And the way for us to allow that resolution is for us to come into love and acceptance and embracing the whole, right? To say, yeah, that's me, without resistance and judgment.
Right.
But also saying that's also, like it's me and not me. It's me and but I'm not, that's not my identity. It just is, or it's not.
Right. Which means that I can embrace it. I don't have to be it.
Yes. Yes. Well, and I am it, but it's also not defining me.
Define that. Yeah.
That's it. I'm not defined by it.
Right.
Yes. And that's the challenge that we make, because when we say things like, and we talk about this energy work too, when we continue to say things like, I am diabetic, I am anemic,
compromised.
Yeah.
Right.
The virus, can we stop protecting ourselves against ourselves? Well, that's the whole point here. That's what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Is when we come into a place, first of all, when you come into, and this is what we mean by when we talk about, right? When I come to a vibration of that wholeness, when I come into this vibration of wholeness and unconditional love, right? Which is that acceptance.
Right.
There is no such thing as disease, because there's nothing that I push away from me. There's nothing that I judge or blame or fear or have anger about, and then all of that goes away, because it all just comes back into the amoeba of the right. And so that's the whole thing. It's like, many of us that talk about all this, it's like, yeah, I've just never even felt it is any kind of purview of mine to get the virus or
to be threatened by
it in any way.
Right.
And so, like, that's the whole thing. Well, like I said, and I feel like the subtle and underlying thing are more people who are starting to say, oh, well, if we're going to get herd immunity, we've got to get out there and get exposed to it, because it's almost this acceptance part of saying, okay, like the cold, we get, like that kind of stuff. And by the way, when we're in that place of flow and wholeness, we won't get sick with anything. We could walk through like I've said many times during this, is I could walk through a field of people with bubonic plague and I could not ever get affected by it.
Right.
I always think of what the biblical story of Jesus and the lepers, right? Like you could just walk through anything, because you're just not at the vibration where it would affect you, right? And so this is a very collective thing that we're like,
Right. And we can choose to look at it as collective disempowering or collective empowering.
right,
And it's a choice. And
right,
we're at that point to where we're tired of the collective disempowerment.
yeah,
It's not working for us anymore.
right, right. And so the more we allow ourselves the space, which is great, the great setup has been, we've allowed ourselves the space
Right.
to breathe, to look inside, right, to come to that acceptance and embracing the whole, so that we can then move forward and say, yeah, okay, we can do this differently now, right? I can do this without being afraid, because I can trust that it's going to come around.
Right.
I can trust that it's gonna it's going to, it's almost like it's going to dissolve away. It's hard to like even get the words for this. It's like it's going to dissolve away into the symphony, because it was just something to help us change into, like in a symphony, change
Keys.
acts or keys, or right,
Right.
or tempo or whatever. It just
Right.
allowed us to shift,
Right.
gave us the space to allow ourselves to shift. And quite honestly, many of us have seen a lot of big catalytic events, possibilities, and stuff like this. This is one of the easiest we could have chosen.
It really is.
As crazy as it sort of looks right now, we could have made it far worse. And by the way, we are having a lot of what many people aren't paying attention to, because everybody's all distracted with the virus. There is a lot of actual natural shifting going on.
Change in movements. Right,
Yeah.
Michael.
Yeah. So like we have a lot of the shifting, so we have a lot of physical shifting on the planet going on, right? We have a lot of volcanoes, we have earthquakes, another tsunami, I think, over
Tornadoes.
in tornadoes. So we have all that stuff, and people like many like to dramatize it, and they say, oh, well, it's, Earth and she's just mad, and, and I'm like, no, we're just coming into completion and balance and wholeness again.
Right.
In a way that we've forgotten, because we've been so exclusive, right?
Right. So distracted.
And so in denial, because we didn't want to look past the, oh, well, you did this to me, not me did this to me.
Right. Right.
I mean, honestly, how much more distinctive can you make it to say, well, this was a man-created virus?
Yeah, I know. Well, you still have those that argue that it isn't, but
it is, even if it isn't, right?
Right. Right.
We created it for the lesson it's here to serve. And so when we come to that place of complete fluidity and accept it, to say, yeah, okay, that's me. And thank you so much for showing yourself, because this part of me was hidden. So right. I'm like, okay, well, great. Now because we have so many things, interestingly, so many insights that many of us who do higher level. Yeah, Nikki says the ozone's healing, skies are clear. It's
all perfect.
Honestly, right. We've had a phenomenally beautiful spring here. Like I have.
Same here.
Gorgeous. Like I cannot tell you a more beautiful spring I can remember, or even had time to notice. So fabulous.
Right.
But what was I going to say now? I got totally distracted.
Oh.
What was I leading up to on that? Oh crap. It'll come back to me. But yeah, so if we want to change, well, so it's funny. The earth is healing on so many levels, Gloria says, right? So healing, again, I always take into account the word healing has this inflection that there's something wrong, right?
Right. It's very judgmental.
It is.
And I never used to see that.
Right.
But it is.
It is. And the thing is for us to look at, not that it's healing, that it is that we're coming back into that wholeness because
Right.
we've stepped back and we're not distracted and we're not ignoring and we're not, we're not pushing it away and creating that dis-ease, right?
Right.
Whether it's in our bodies or with us. Now, many are still doing that, right? And they still don't believe that. There are still many who don't believe that it's you who creates a disease within your body, whether it's a
Right.
cold or a flu
Right.
or a virus. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Or
Or cancer.
an autoimmune thing, or you know, uh, cancer.
Right.
That's our creation. So yes, and what we started talking about. Oh, it wasn't on this last week. It was on our group energy share that we did on Tuesday. That we talked about the nature. Michael said, "Then getting into to discover our nature." Nature, because so many other things have quieted down, nature has become very loud in its messages of reminding us of ourselves. Yes.
Well, and I think the messages were always there. We just didn't hear them
Yes. Yeah, it's just a lot louder.
until it got to be like a tornado or a hurricane
Or an
or a
earthquake or a volcano. Yeah.
drought or flooding or something that was newsworthy.
Which is funny because it's all still happening,
No.
but it hasn't been in the news so much. You have to look for it.
Right. Right.
And so, and I have, because I feel we felt, many of us, the rumbling underneath. And that's really I don't want to call it writing itself because that judges it as wrong, right? But it's the shaking
Balance.
everything, sort of shaking everything else out into wholeness again and into integration and assimilation, into
Right.
yeah, this really beautiful symphony. That's what we came here.
And it's like that part from my personal experience can't be hidden anymore, can't be rejected anymore, can't be denied anymore.
Right.
And it's it's like a grand awakening in and of itself.
Yeah. It's another facet of ourselves, right?
Right.
As part of this
Right.
very tightly integrated group of dimensions that we've created here to be this earth representation.
Right.
And to think about it, like, I don't know, one day I was in meditation and I sort of went in all these directions of all the dimensions that make up what the representation of earth is, right? And thinking of that, including every single one of us has a bajillion different dimensions within us, right? And then this connection, the way we connect, and then the way, like, and how it's this. I'm just like, wow. I mean, it's incredible to think about that. And yet it's so easy because we are the creators of it all.
All right.
Yeah. Right. And so if we think about that, thinking, okay, well, to make it an easy thing, right? We could take it down to the physical body, right? To say, okay, we have whatever it is, 2 to 3 trillion cells. I've seen more in some places, but I think it's 2 to 3, about that. Trillions of cells in our bodies that are all conscious and consciously functioning and creating and evolving and dying and transitioning constantly. Right. All on their own, all individual consciousness, and they make up our organs, which have a consciousness of their own, of what they do and what they function, and how they function, and how and it's just incredible to think about that, and to think that just one facet of our consciousness that we create as souls, like, would manage this physical body for the piece of it, right?
And they're finding that trees have the same connectivity.
Yes. And that's what we're here to remember, right? So it's like, it's interesting that I've come to a place now I've always been a nature lover and love to be out in nature, but it's like, I've gotten into such a habit of, my husband and I take a walk almost like every day, that if I miss a day of our walk, because we have the greenway and the park back here, the preserve, I feel like, oh, I got to get outside.
Right. And I tell you, I did hard yard work for 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it really was amazing how that helped shift a lot of this internal darkness. It was it was hard work, but it was being in nature and being physically active and in a state of allowing.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the detail. That's the detail for us to complete before we come out of the cocoon.
Right.
Because we asked for clarity on that last week, right? So that's
Here
the
we go.
detail. Here it
Here
is
it is.
on your
Yep.
platter.
Right. Silver platter, mind you.
You only needed it 5 million ways before you finally got the clock in the
Right.
head. But that's okay.
Right.
That's us. That's me saying that to me. That's okay. All in love. So for us, it is really to finish those details. I think
Right.
that's really where we're being led today, right? Is to for creation is to allow ourselves with an open heart, open,
Right.
you know, to allow all the possibility and accepting all of that within us. That I
Right.
mean, even the dark. Like I think about talk about gardening. I think some of the most fascinating things are when you lift up a rock that's been sitting someplace. Like I feel like, because it's like, oh, look at this, look at what you find under here,
I know. Yep. And it's funny because a lot of people are afraid.
Yeah.
So it's what a perfect analogy of, looking at all the cracks and crevices within yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's no judgment either. That's the other what I keep on
Right.
getting to say. There's no judgment on those who've gotten the virus or whatever, because
Right.
it's a particular purpose for whatever,
Right.
and whoever has gotten it. Yes, the whole population control thing at a bigger level, but then that's still us, right? So then why do we need to control ourselves? Like those are the things, the details for us to look at that are still outstanding, right? How to accept that in the wholeness, because of the people we judge the most are really another facet of ourselves.
Right.
Right. So we can scream and judge and be angry and criticize and tell everybody who's wrong and who's right. But even those who we could consider wrong are still a part of us.
Right.
As what we consider the right.
Right. Which, goes back to something else we've always talked about, is honoring your journey and everyone else's equally.
Yes. However, the more we all accept this within ourselves,
right,
the faster this will complete itself collectively, so that we don't have to manifest it again in a more intense manner, because that's the way it rolls. If we've gotten to this level collectively,
right,
yeah, and it's not that we want to fear what's next. It's just that, well, it could be even more of a challenge for us to come.
Well, and it's funny, you hear, well, the reason why they gave it a number is because there will be a 20.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you're right.
So let's let 19 be our only need.
Because I don't even remember. I don't really want to remember how many we put out there as possible.
Right.
So,
right.
So whatever it is to finish the details, that, by the way, we are worthy of doing that. We are allowed to do that. In fact, any limitations that are imposed on us are things that we are imposing on ourselves, right? Whether we accept it in victimhood, whether we, or whatever. And because here's the thing, I saw a posting the other day. It was really nice. It was like, I do this out of respect, but not out of fear. Like, oh, if I wear a mask, it's out of respect. And I'm like, well, you're one step ahead of me because, or whatever, because my thing is, well, I'm not guided to wear masks, so therefore I don't.
Right. Right.
I did once.
I know I've made the conscious decision not to shop in the county right next to us that requires the mask. It's like, okay, I won't frequent those stores.
I wore a mask once, and it was this weekend. It was for 5 minutes because I didn't know I was going to be required to wear one, or else I wouldn't have waited online to get into this particular store. It was a Asian market by us. And we only needed like 2 things. And we happened to be in the area because we went out to go food shopping, and we waited in line for like 10 minutes, right? So then we get to the door, and at the door, inside the door, is like a manager holding masks, and he's only letting people in. He can't wow. Mask. So,
I'm surprised there's enough for them to be able to do that.
Oh yeah, he had a ton of them.
I guess that's why hospitals can't get them.
Yeah, I guess so. So I was like, okay. And then afterward, I was like, I said to my husband, the next time that happens, I'm just going to walk away
Right.
because, first
Right.
of all, and then I was like, oh, I guess I just needed to have that experience because, by the way, it felt even more limiting, right? To have that thing on my face, even for
Oh,
5 minutes,
yes.
because we literally needed two things out of that store, right? So we were in
Right.
and out.
Nikki's saying that Michigan requires it now.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, yeah. Well, Nikki,
We're
you
still
live
county
in
by county here.
Nikki, you live in you live in like the twilight zone with what I understand is going on in Michigan. So,
Right.
as I said last week, thank you so much for taking that on.
Yep.
But no, there's not just Michigan. There's a bunch of places that. I think New York's like that now too.
Yeah, I don't know.
But the thing is, like I said, like the reality is, like there's all this panic and they're shutting down and thinking the masks do almost nothing. In fact,
A ninja in the store. That's pretty good.
that's good. I pretend I'm a ninja. Well, yeah, and he says, yes, we do. The Twilight Zone. Yeah. The but the thing is, like, and it was such a weird thing because it was like you're breathing, and it's almost like, well, it feels like you're breathing into a paper bag because you got your breath right in there because it's stuck on your face.
Right.
So it's
Right.
hot. That's sort of gross to me because I'm like, okay, that's more limiting. And of course, that's judging it. But then I was just like, yeah, how does this not breed more sickness? I just don't know. Right. And so, like, literally, I couldn't take it off fast enough as we were literally not even out the stuff, like, as we were walking out the door. So, like, just pulled it off. And I was just like, wow. But yeah, next time I'll just go. I'll just leave because it wasn't that important. Like, it was just the fact that we had been waiting online for whatever it was, 10 or 15 minutes. And I was just like,
Right.
oh,
Yeah.
well, boo. But anyway, so I mean, a majority of people had masks on because they're still like in that allowing that limitation and the victimhood thing. So, and there's all the judgment that's going on right now too, which is a really challenging thing because we have this value of, am I a good person or a bad person?
Right.
I, like, oh, that person, they're bad because they're selfish because they're going out. Like, that's the stuff that's been propagated and put out there. Good
Right.
morning, Sandy. And so we then believe, oh, well, if people think that of me, then I'm a bad person. That goes, there's that judgment, there's that
Right.
peak, there's
Right.
that detail for you to look
Right.
at because it's presented to you. Here's the
Well,
thing.
and it also gets to that fine line of, I'm not judging myself, so I'm okay, but I let the thought of someone else judging me impact me.
Right. Right. And that's where people tend to fold. Oh, well, all these people were looking at me, judging me because I wasn't wearing, like a mask or whatever. I, and then I look and go, God, why did I even cave on that? Then I tried to judge myself for it. And then I was just like, it was 5 minutes. Like, it didn't even bother
Right.
me.
Right.
And so, I mean, it did bother me a little bit because it just was gross because of the hot air in my face. Um, but the whole thing is, if you really truly get to that place of acceptance, right? You don't care what people judge of you. And by the way,
Right.
people stop, or they stop, it stops being in your reality. First, there'll be a little bit of resistance, and then it's for you to sort of accept. And then it's for them to get to the place, for you to get to this place. Because then you get this like, oh, well, you're selfish and this, that, it's like, you know what? I am, um, yeah, I'm self-centered in unconditional love
Right. For everyone.
for everyone because you are me. So yes, I am. And that's for all of us to be, right?
Right.
I'm centered on my guidance and I trust it. And if my guidance says it's all okay, then I trust it's all okay. I don't care what the CDC or the WHO or, the politicians or whatever say.
Right. I mean, sorry. I mean, you don't believe them to inject yourself with bleach. So why would you believe them about
I
anything?
know. It's like, oh no, that's ridiculous. But there's all this.
But everything else I say is real.
Right. So Yeah, Sandy said most businesses in her city won't allow her to go in unless she, because she's in Dallas County, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've chosen to shop in another city. I honor their choice. I simply don't want to wear a mask. Exactly.
Yep.
It's like honoring your own guidance versus, and here it's not that, like, they recommend it in a lot of stores, but they don't. That was the one store that they were forcing the issue, right?
Right.
So, um, anyway, so that's that looking over the wall to say what part of me am I still denying myself,
Right.
right?
Right. Use it as a billboard externally to look internally, because if you look at that, so within, so without. So if this is going on out here, you know what's going on in here.
Right. And to go
Where
back
are
to
you
like,
still judging yourself?
right, and to go back to the dreams that we both had, which is so funny, of course,
Right.
perfectly aligned, right?
Right.
I could choose to say, well, I don't need an airport. I can just be there because I already
Right.
am, right?
Right.
I don't need it. Or you can even go, oh, I don't need an airport. I could take a car. I could take a train. I could do this. I could have all these other options, or I could just be there and not need any transport whatsoever because we've become such, we've become so habitual on allowing things to run us.
Right. Living within the limits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
That it's like, okay, well, no, I don't. And I can still get what I need or what I want, whatever, if I when I transcend those limits, because that's me creating those limits anyway. So if I accept that as a part of me, as a part of another facet of me, they're just going to go away.
Right. Right.
And that's a challenging thing to see with all this so flared up and in everybody's faces. But
But that's the whole point of it.
yeah, it is. It is.
That's what it takes to get people to move away from where they are.
Yeah. So all that. I'm sorry. Just I could feel the energy. Just
Oh, I know. I can feel it starting to.
it's like I needed to sigh that out because
Right.
that was yeah. So whatever that is for us to allow that wholeness, to allow that acceptance, to allow that be able to see it and experience it differently and not shut down by limitations that are,
Right.
I want to say, presented to us as possibilities, right?
Right. Yep.
And really at the end of the day, if you just go by guidance, back to square one, right?
Right.
But we have so much that's jaded because of how other people look at us, right? So that's for us to change too. So wholeness, acceptance. Oh, we've talked about this before, but this is a much different spin on the understanding of it, right?
Right.
That looking at the details that are still left out there of ourselves, which is that shadow side, that resistance, the fear, the anger, the control, the limitations, all that we think is a little tiny part of ourselves, but it's really, like you said in the beginning, 50%.
Right.
As
Right.
we are light, so we are dark. That's part of the duality of the creation of these embodiments. So accepting that wholeness in this level, right, at the collective level, so that we can see our way through it in a different way, have that lesson completed and that detail accepted and realized within us, so that we can move forward beyond here without repetition, free of repetition. All right, you ready?
Yeah. I feel it already.
I know, me too. So let's just go. Anybody who's watching, just close your eyes, take a deep breath, and allow yourself to receive. It was very jittery in the beginning.
Right.
And then at one point, I saw almost like a big, not a shield, but an umbrella, like this umbrella of encompassment, like that just came out. And then once that happened, everything felt like it opened up in here. It was really nice.
Yeah, I felt a lot of heart expansion.
Yeah.
And I know that at one point, I don't know, I don't know what movie it was from, but it was talking about, a lot of a lot of religions are like, drive the darkness out, and it's like the way to drive the darkness out is to don't make it your enemy.
Hmm.
And it was just like this, it was like, but oh,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that felt really good at the end. Yeah, I was like, oh, we could stay longer. Well, we can come back.
yeah, yeah. And then it was like, but you can go back later.
That's right. Well, you're always there, right?
Right, right.
All right, so that's for everyone to look at this week. What are the
Ugh.
details in your life? And I'm talking about the things that you're saying, oh, I have no control over, right? Or I'm a victim to, like, look beyond that, because that's where the veil is. It's like, okay, so why do I have that created in my reality? Where's the darkness within me? And look at it, don't judge it, so that we can start embracing it, because that's where these are the little hidden cracks and crevices that it's important to complete right now. So
Right.
all right, well, we'll see what this week brings.
Right.
All right, everyone, thanks for joining us. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avignoni.
signing off on this week's Ascended World. See you next time.